He always called me a loser. Turns out, he was right. Because only a loser would stand by as his brother stole his fiancée, or so he thought. I was never my family's favorite. That title had always belonged to my older brother, Lucas. Charismatic, successful, effortlessly charming. He was the golden child in every way. Meanwhile, I was just Ethan, the quiet, awkward younger sibling who never quite measured up. Growing up, it was always about Lucas. He was the star athlete, the straight-A student. The one who could walk into a room and command attention without even trying. I, on the other hand, was the kid who preferred books over social gatherings, who struggled to gain my parents' approval no matter how hard I worked. And Lucas made sure I never forgot it. Try harder, loser, he'd say with a smirk whenever I failed at something. Whether it was sports, socializing, or simply existing in his orbit. It became a running joke between him and my parents. How I was always a step behind, always the lesser version of him. I learned to live with it, to lower my expectations. But one thing I never doubted was Emma. Emma was the light in my life, the one person who truly saw me for who I was. We met in college. And from the very first moment, I felt like I had finally found someone who made me feel like I mattered. She laughed at my dumb jokes, listened to my dreams, and made me believe that, for once, I was enough. When I proposed to her, I thought I had finally wanted something. I thought, for the first time, I had something that Lucas could never take away from me. I was wrong. It started with small things. Emma began canceling plans, making excuses for why she was too busy to see me. She started dressing up more often, wearing perfume even when she swore she was just going out with friends. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut, tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. Then came the whispers, friends hesitating before speaking, the awkward glances, the pity in their eyes. "You should talk to Emma," my best friend Jake finally said one night. "Why?" I asked, heart pounding. He hesitated, then sighed. "Because I've seen her with Lucas." My stomach dropped. It didn't take long to find proof. Late at night, when she thought I was asleep, I checked her phone. The messages were there, flirty texts, secret meetings, the confirmation of the worst betrayal I could imagine. My fiancée was in love with my brother. I confronted her the next day, unable to keep it in any longer. "Tell me the truth, Emma," I demanded, my voice shaking. "Are you seeing Lucas?" Her face went pale. That was all the confirmation I needed. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I never meant for this to happen. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand why wasn't I enough? But all I could do was stand there, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. And then Lucas walked in. He looked at me the way he always had, like I was some pathetic joke. "You really thought she'd stay with you?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Come on, Ethan. You've always been second place. Why would this be any different?" That was the moment I shattered. I walked out without another word, ignoring Emma's sobs, ignoring Lucas's smug expression. I left everything behind, the wedding plans, the apartment we had shared, the life I had built with her. I had lost. Again. But this time, I wasn't going to let it break me. This time, I was going to change everything. The days after the betrayal passed in a haze. I barely left my apartment, barely ate. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from friends, from Emma, even from my parents. But I ignored them all. What was there to say? That my fiancé had chosen my brother? That I had been humiliated yet again? Lucas had won. Just like always. For weeks, I let myself drown in that thought. I quit my job, stopped going outside, and spent most of my time staring at the ceiling, wondering where I had gone wrong. Was I really so worthless that even the woman who had promised to love me forever had chosen someone else? One night, as I sat in my dark apartment, surrounded by half-eaten takeout containers and unopened bills, my phone rang again. This time, I picked it up. "Ethan," a familiar voice said. "Jake." I sighed. "If you're calling to check up on me, don't bother. I'm not calling to check up on you. I'm calling to tell you to get off your ass. Not in the mood for a pep talk." "Tough," he snapped. "Because I'm giving you one anyway. Look, man, I get it. What happened sucks. It's the worst. But are you really going to let them win? Are you going to let Lucas and Emma ruin your life?" I swallowed hard, gripping the phone. "They already did." "No," Jake said. "They just knocked you down. And you're the one choosing to stay down." His words stung, but not because they were cruel. Because they were true. I had spent my whole life letting Lucas define me, letting his victories shape my failures. But why? Why did I always have to be second place? That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the loser anymore. The first step was getting out of town. I packed up my things, sold what I didn't need, and accepted a job offer in another city, a position I had once turned down because I had planned to stay close to Emma. Not anymore. The new city was a fresh start. I threw myself into work, determined to prove to myself that I was more than just Lucas's shadow. I hit the gym, started dressing better, pushed myself harder than ever before. And slowly, things changed. For the first time in my life, people noticed me. At work, I was no longer overlooked. I was respected. I was good at what I did, and I wasn't afraid to show it. My confidence grew. I made new friends, built a new life, one that had nothing to do with Lucas or Emma. Months passed, then a year, and then, out of nowhere, I saw her name on my phone. Emma. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I should have ignored it. But a part of me, some dark, twisted part, needed to know. I answered. Ethan? Her voice was quiet, hesitant. I don't know if I should be calling you. But she took a shaky breath. I wanted to see how you're doing. I almost laughed. How I'm doing? I'm fine, I said flatly. I'm glad. A long pause. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. And I made a mistake. A mistake. The word twisted in my gut, but I didn't let it show. Oh, I said coolly. Lucas isn't who I thought he was. She admitted. He's different now. Selfish. Cold. I thought we were in love, but he just treats me like I belong to him. And I realized that what you and I had, it was real. But I wasn't that man anymore. Emma, I said, my voice calm, steady. I'm sorry you're unhappy. But that's not my problem anymore. She sucked in a breath. Ethan, please. I know I hurt you. But I moved on, I said, cutting her off. You should too. And then I hung up. For the first time in my life, I was the one walking away. And it felt damn good. That wasn't the last time I heard from her. Over the next few weeks, Emma tried again and again. Texts, calls, even emails. I ignored them all. Then one day, Jake called me with some interesting news. Lucas is falling apart, he said, amusement clear in his voice. Oh, yeah. Apparently, his business is tanking. Made some bad investments. And guess what? Emma left him. I smirked. Karma's a bitch. But I wasn't done yet. Because I knew exactly when Lucas would need me the most. And I planned to make my next move when it would hurt him the most. Because for once, I was in control. A year ago, I had walked away broken. Now, I was coming back as a different man. When I first moved away, I thought I'd never return to my hometown. Too many painful memories. Too much history that I wanted to bury. But as fate would have it, an opportunity presented itself. One I couldn't resist. I had been working hard, climbing the ladder at my new company, and now they wanted me to spearhead an expansion into my old city. The irony was almost poetic. I had left as the loser Lucas had always mocked, and now I was returning with success he could only dream of. The timing was perfect. Lucas had always been the untouchable one, the golden child, the successful businessman, the one everyone admired. But his empire was crumbling. He had gotten too arrogant. Too reckless. His business, once thriving, was now riddled with debt from failed investments. His reputation had taken a hit, and with Emma leaving him, he no longer had the adoring fiancée by his side. It was time to finish what he had started. When I walked into our parents' house for dinner, the room went silent. I had been gone for over a year, barely in contact, and now here I was, standing taller, more confident than ever. My mother gasped. My father raised an eyebrow, and Lucas? Lucas looked like he had just seen a ghost. Ethan? My mother finally said, standing up. You're back. I smiled, setting my coat down. Just for work. Thought I'd stop by. My father eyed me. Work? What kind of work? Corporate expansion, I said smoothly, taking a seat. My company is setting up a branch here. I'm overseeing it. Lucas scoffed. You're overseeing it? I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time. Surprised. He frowned, but didn't respond. Dinner was tense. My parents were full of questions, clearly shocked by my transformation. I answered calmly, keeping my cool. But I could feel Lucas watching me, his jaw tight, his hands clenching his fork a little too hard. For the first time in my life, he was uncomfortable, and I was just getting started. A few days later, I ran into Emma. I was at a cafe, sipping coffee and reviewing some reports, when I heard someone clear their throat. I looked up, and there she was. Emma. She looked different. A little thinner, a little paler. Her once bright eyes now held something else, regret. Ethan, she said softly. I leaned back in my chair, calmly stirring my coffee. Emma. She bit her lip. I heard you were back. I nodded. Looks like it. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. Can we talk? I raised an eyebrow, but motioned for her to sit. She sat down, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I just let her talk. She sighed. I thought I knew what I wanted. Lucas, he was exciting, you know? He had this way of making everything feel larger than life. But it was all fake. He never really cared about me. Not like you did. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching her squirm. He changed, she whispered. Or maybe he was always like that, and I just didn't see it. He was controlling, manipulative. He never listened to me. Never treated me like a partner. And when things got hard, he turned cold. It was all about his image, his success. I set my cup down. So why are you telling me this? She looked down, ashamed. Because I know I made the worst mistake of my life. I chose wrong. And I wanted to know if there was any way you could ever forgive me. I let out a small chuckle. Emma's eyes widened. You think this is funny? No, I said, shaking my head. I think it's ironic. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. You see, Emma, I said, you made your choice. And now you have to live with it. Just like I had to live with mine. Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan, please. I don't hate you, I interrupted. I don't even wish you any harm. But I don't look at you and see the woman I loved anymore. I look at you and see a lesson. She let out a soft sob, covering her mouth with her hand. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table. Take care, Emma. And with that, I walked away. But the best part was yet to come. Lucas was still struggling to keep his business afloat. He had burned too many bridges, made too many enemies. And now, his final lifeline was a merger with a larger firm. A firm that I was now in charge of. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, settling into the conference room with my team. When Lucas walked in, flanked by his desperate-looking partners, his face went pale. His confidence, the smug arrogance that had once defined him, was gone. I smiled. Good to see you, Lucas. He swallowed. You work for them? Not quite. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. I run the expansion division. Which means this deal. It goes through me. Lucas's face twisted. This is a joke. No joke, I said. Just business. He clenched his fists. You think you can screw me over? Oh, no, I said, shaking my head. I wouldn't do that. I leaned closer. I'm just going to give you what you always wanted. He frowned. What the hell does that mean? I smiled. It means I'm finally going to treat you like you treated me. I slid the contract across the table. It was a deal, all right. But it was one that favored my company, one that would strip Lucas of any real power, reducing him to nothing more than a figurehead while my firm took full control. He scanned the pages, his hands shaking. This would destroy me. I nodded. Yeah, it would. He looked up at me, rage flashing in his eyes. You can't do this. I leaned back. I am doing this. Lucas's jaw tightened. So this is revenge, huh? No, I said simply. This is me finally realizing my worth. He stared at me, his entire world crashing down. For years, I had been the loser in his eyes. But now, for the first time, he saw the truth. I had won, and there was nothing he could do about it. Lucas sat frozen, his hands clenched into fists as he stared at the contract in front of him. I could see the war raging inside him, the disbelief, the rage, the desperation. He had spent his entire life looking down on me, mocking me, treating me like a joke. And now, in this moment, he realized the truth. I wasn't the loser anymore. I leaned back in my chair, giving him time to process the weight of what was happening. His business, the empire he had built on arrogance and deception, was now at my mercy. He could sign the deal and become nothing more than a puppet in his own company, or he could refuse and watch everything collapse. I had played this game carefully. For months, I had maneuvered the pieces, aligning my company's expansion strategy to make Lucas's business completely dependent on us. He had burned too many bridges, lost too much trust. We were his last chance. And I was making sure that his final choice was one that would humble him for good. Finally, he spoke. "This isn't over," he said through gritted teeth. "You think you've won. But I'll come back from this." I smirked, shaking my head. "You still don't get it, do you, Lucas?" I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "This isn't about winning or losing. This is about finally setting things right. You spent your whole life taking things from me, respect, opportunities, even Emma. But what you never understood was that I don't need to beat you. I just needed to stop letting you control my life." He glared at me, but I could see the cracks in his mask. He was struggling to maintain the illusion of power. I pushed the contract closer to him. "You can either sign this and salvage what's left, or you can walk away and let it all burn. Your choice." His hands trembled as he picked up the pen. A year ago, I would have given anything to see him suffer like this. But now, I just felt free. Lucas scrawled his signature across the page and shoved the contract toward me. "There," he spat. "Happy now?" I smiled. "Not happy. Just done." I stood, gathering the papers and nodding to my team. "Pleasure doing business with you, Lucas." And then, without looking back, I walked out. The day of Lucas and Emma's wedding arrived, but there was no celebration. The moment word spread about the contract, about how Lucas had lost control of his company, Emma had second thoughts. She had already been having doubts, his arrogance, his neglect, the way he treated her like a trophy rather than a partner. And now, with his business in ruins and his future uncertain, she saw him for what he truly was. Weak. She tried calling me again, leaving me messages, even showing up at my office once. I never answered. I had no interest in rekindling something that had already burned to ashes. On what should have been their wedding day, Lucas was alone. No grand ceremony. No perfect fairy tale. Just a man sitting in the wreckage of his own making. As for me, I moved on. Not in the dramatic, revenge-fueled way I once fantasized about, but in the way that actually mattered. I thrived at work, built strong relationships, and most importantly, I learned to define myself on my own terms. I no longer cared about proving anything to Lucas, to my parents, or even to Emma. I had become the man I was always meant to be, and it had nothing to do with them. One evening, as I sat on my apartment balcony, sipping a glass of whiskey and watching the city lights, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jake. "Jake, heard about Lucas. He's still spiraling. Guess karma finally caught up with him." I chuckled, typing back a reply. Me, it always does. As I set my phone down, I exhaled deeply, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing validation. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was simply free. And that was the greatest victory of all. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking Reddit cheating stories happening around you.